And then we moved to Gramercy, and that's the home I remember because that was so much fun. The 1101 Gramercy, I think that's what it was. And the phone number there was export 42184, I believe.
My parents bought that acre of ground. It was maybe it was more than an acre. But they bought it with the idea that they were really raising a family, and they wanted it. I think because my mom and dad, probably my dad more than my mom, had grown up with that environment, he wanted to recreate it.
So that's when we moved to the house on Gramercy Street, 1101 Gramercy. And I was in Avenue, and I was in the 6th grade.
And I was 2 years old.
And that's the house that I remember the most. There was a front room that had a beautiful bay window that you could see the view of the mountains. We loved coming in at night and looking at the moon.
Beautiful. The mountains were right there, and they just covered the whole view of the window.
Next to the front room was like a study that had
we called
rustic,
it the den.
Yeah, the den, and it had rustic walls and had Indian rugs on the floor and a fireplace, and my father's desk was in there. And then that home had 3 bedrooms, and then they built a bedroom in the basement.
Doug was in the bedroom in the
But
basement.
we had 5 children in just 1 bathroom. And, you know, it's true, we waited in line and everything, but now when I think about that, I think, wow, how did we do that?
We were all patient with each other.
Yeah.
We just waited.
To me, how did you grow up with 7 people in 1 bathroom? Well, the bathroom was Grand Central. It was important, and we had a lot of privacy. When you needed to use the bathroom, you just said, "I'm using the bathroom," and shut the door. But when you didn't need it for private purposes, the bathroom was where we all sat around. We'd sit on the floor or we'd sit on the counter and talk to each other while we curled our hair. And this was the days of rollers that you wore all night, sponge rollers, that you wore all night, or it was also the days of the big hair in the 1960s. And I remember Jeannie Richards, who lived next door, and Jeannie McAllister, my sister, ratting their hair in front of the mirror for hours. And people would go in and out of the bathroom, and we'd all sit around and talk. And so it had 1 long wall. And on the wall were 7 little towel rings. And they were, the tallest one was Dad's, and the next tallest was Mom's, and it went all the way down to mine was the smallest. So everybody always knew exactly which their towel was, and it was very well organized. And we each had a little drawer in the bathroom too. The one rectangular wall was all the towels, and the wall facing it was more like 4 drawers, and we each had a half a drawer with a divider in the middle. But the bathroom was extremely well organized, and it worked really well, and it was a great place to sit and gossip. You got all of the high school chatter that went on in there. My cousin, Jerry Lynn, came and lived with us when she was in high school, and I would have been probably 8 or 9 years old. I'm guessing that was about when it was. But so we had a lot of teenagers in the house, and they would all sit around the bathroom and comb their hair and put on their makeup and talk. And I got to, I loved to just be the fly on the wall and listen to what was going on. And that we would do that in the bathroom. I also remember being the fly on the wall in the living room because we had a sofa that was, it went diagonally across one corner, so behind the sofa was a little triangle space where I kept all my toys when I was really little, and I would crawl back there and have my own little play place, but it also was very nice and secret, and I could listen to all the teenage gossip that was going on in the room. And Uncle Doug and I used to climb behind the couch and tease Aunt Jeannie and Aunt Marianne about how we were going to stay back there when their dates came to pick them up.
And then in the basement was storage, and I remember the sump pump
Yeah.
in the basement, and clotheslines to hang the clothes on. And That's where my mother put her bottled fruit and any storage that we had. But then there was also the room that they made. But it seemed to me like a big, was it Doug's room and then became a storage room?
It was, I remember.
But that's where the
Doug-
washer and dryer were too, downstairs.
Yeah, I remember Doug and Dad planning out that bedroom and building the bedroom in the basement.
I helped Dad build some shelves once when he was putting together some things in the basement so he could do Doug's room. And bless his heart, he measured from the floor up instead of the ceiling down, and they tilted. So if we finished, he had to start all over again. And I just admired that he just took it apart and we began again.
And she would work downstairs, down our steep basement steps, is where she would do what she called hand washing. And in those days, boy, you'd hand wash things to get stains out of them, and washing was a big deal. And it was time intensive, very labor intensive. And the phone would ring, and there was one phone, and it was a black dial phone. And she'd run all the way up the stairs and talk to some sister in the ward who needed a listening ear. There was no way to hook up to do work while you were on the phone. There was no Bluetooth. And so she would go downstairs to work, and then she'd run back up the stairs again, and she would do that time and time again to speak to these women, and a lot of them just needed to talk. And she was very loving, had a very tender heart.
At that house, we had a double car garage. It wasn't one door, it was two single car entrances, but it had a double driveway, which was unusual for the time. I would say with one or two exceptions on our street, everyone had a single driveway. And that became the neighborhood basketball court because it was such a relatively large driveway. I've gone back now and it seems it's much smaller to me, but at the time it was huge.
I loved our Gramercy home. It was about an acre, and there was a huge garden, and Dad always turned it all over by hand with a shovel, and a large lawn, and he wanted to make sure we had lots of activity and fun. There was a covered porch in the back, and so we could dance on that or on the patio to the side of that.
Mother and Dad did wonderful things. Mother had pink rose bushes that lined all the driveway, and then she had flowers everywhere, and everything she touched, she just had a green thumb. And she had a prize iris garden that was fabulous irises. The people who lived there before had raised them, and Mother had taken wonderful care of them. She had all these gorgeous begonias that she put on the north side of the garage, and I think some of them Marianne had received when she was married or something, but anyway, she planted them there and they were just beautiful.
It had an acre of ground. So it was the house, and then behind the house was a large orchard that had been cleared of most of the trees. There were several peach trees and one pear tree. Trying to think, that's probably, next door were a lot of cherry trees, but an apricot tree. But other than that, all the other trees had been cleared out, and so my father planted vegetables. And we always had a giant vegetable garden.
It had a big yard, and it was on like a third of an acre of ground, so there were fruit trees, a little orchard behind. There was a beautiful willow tree. And I've been back recently, and they have a swing hanging in the willow tree.
The willow tree is still there.
But I remember being, just lying down under the willow tree with my friends and talking about what we were going to do when we grew up.
I loved the willow tree. It was just a piece of beauty. It was just that beautiful willow tree in the middle of our backyard. I remember one time somebody dared me to climb it, and I said, I can climb that. And I climbed right up it, and then I couldn't climb down it. And I remember just being petrified, and I think it was Doug who talked me down, take one step, take one step. And I got down the willow tree. I never climbed it after that. But under the willow tree, it was just magical. It was a beautiful shady spot, and you could have picnics under the tree, and you could play with your dolls under the tree.
We had a big enough yard that oftentimes the neighborhood kids would come to play. So I have many happy memories of playing at home.
We had a swing set that we would swing and swing and swing for hours and hours and hours in that backyard. We had a clothesline. We would put blankets over the clothesline and make little huts out of the blankets. I remember many days hanging clothes with my mom out on that clothesline. We didn't use the dryer unless we absolutely had to. Clothes were better in the sunshine.
This was several years after Mother had sold the house, and so the original fellow that she'd sold it to, Todd, was still in the house, and he had made some changes inside. And she said, "Oh, Jeannie, come in and see what he's done to the house." And she was all excited about, the changes this young single man had made to the house. I was in no condition. I went behind the garage next to the Richards and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. I had on sunglasses and I thought, I'm not going into that house. I don't want to see any changes. I loved that place. I loved growing up there. I had all those memories. And I've never gone back. One night I did go back at midnight, and I just drove down the street, and I could see that some of the bushes and flowers were different, and I thought, that's it, I'll never go back. And I haven't been back.